thank you very much, Nigel and Sarah, for being with us. Appreciate your time. This is just a catch up from the previous meeting and to go through any changes. And we have had correspondence that, oh, there's Kate now. Nigel, I don't know whether you want to just give a brief overview of that.
Well, only really to say that following sending 3 emails to Jeremy Quin MP and then contacting the parliamentary correspondence unit to find out what protocol an MP has to follow for replying, 2 days after I sent that email, I suddenly got a response. And that response obviously basically says no to reopening the ranges, but it does actually give more information that hasn't been provided up until now. It does seem to show that the MOD have got specific figures, and clearly they must have had records from which to obtain those figures. So it's beyond me why they've not provided that information to you or me previously over the last year when it's been asked for. Yeah. I'm not too sure. Do you recognise that?
Yeah, there was pictures on Facebook about that. I don't know where exactly it is, but it is on the range, the closed off area.
Right.
It is done at a time where they say that they have closed the ranges for their own benefit, so that all of that damage is under the new restrictions. And I would suspect that would be an awful lot of damage. So there is something to do with the charges that have been happening. And to back that up, the freedom of information that we asked for incidents that happened last year, the number of incidents that were criminal damage has gone up last year in their own figures. So what we're seeing in this letter doesn't tie into the figures that we've been presented so far. And the statement that's saying that the closure has had an impact, we all know that what the biggest impact of last year's number of incidents and costs would have been the effect of COVID. We've been locked in our houses for the best part of last year. So I don't think the defences have done anything to do with improving the situation, particularly when you see the picture they've used in evidence, the amount of damage that has been done by vandals. When it was reported on Facebook, it was the middle of the day. So the idea that any casual or vandals having been put off by casual members of the public, I think would have been the case there. We're not seeing any interaction with the public at that point, and the numerous damage that's been done may be stopped by the public being there, and to reiterate basically that damage has been at a time where they've locked it down.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, that with the the very specific figures that they're now giving is completely at odds with the information that they've been trying very hard not to give us at all with our freedom of information requests. And then they came out with the £171,000, which they then said was calculated by corporate knowledge, whatever that might be. And now suddenly we're coming out with all these facts and figures. So, either they were lying then or they're lying now, is my summation of where we are with it, or possibly both.
Well, I would say,
and I think that's the starting point that we need to get to is I have done a freedom of information for the figures in that, using your letter reference to ask for the figures that would be used in that letter, to get to some detail.
And also,
I think,
is that also in respect of the sort of the hours of lost training?
Yeah.
Because again,
I've asked for the summation, the figures used to calculate.
Joe coming through. She obviously can't. I'm just going to click her and talk to her.
Okay.
Hi, Joe. Hasn't got through. I'll have to call her back. I think she's trying to get through and can't.
Yeah, I had trouble getting in.
She can't, not responding to me for some reason.
Let me just try and call her back. Looks like she's tried to call me twice. I only have one ring.
When we challenge this information, do you think there is any merit in saying, thank you very much for the information you provided? Were you lying then or are you lying now? Maybe not lying, but, you know, which of your statements has been factually inaccurate? I'm not sure that we couldn't just say, thank you very much. That's very interesting. Which of your statements is inaccurate?
Yes. Yeah, I don't, perhaps we shouldn't use the word lying, but
yes,
something along the lines of, you know, this information has only just been, you know, produced by you, despite several.
This is a different response to the one we had when we issued the same question however long ago. Which response is correct? And why is there a difference between the two responses? Something along those lines, you know?
Yeah.
I agree we shouldn't use subjective language like lying, but
Even though we know,
yes. I think the subtext will be clear, even though the phrasing would be polite.
Yeah, Joe's going to try again. She has sent you an email, Carl. She has sent you an email, but it's gone from blue to magenta, but she can't seem to be able to get into the Teams meeting, which is unusual.
No, that's I'm not sure what else I can do without going into support mode, but
don't worry about it.
We'll see. We were just debating around
a follow-up.
I think there's two areas here. Obviously, it would seem to me that whether the figures that they originally gave us were exact, I don't know. But clearly, one would have thought that with the MP signing the letter and with the specific sort of challenge that was made to him in my letter, I would have thought it's more likely that this information that he's put in his letter is more backed up. Because if you recall in my first letter to him, I said, well, you're referring to vandalism, whereas Colonel Cook in September had basically said vandalism is not a problem at all, it's health and safety. Now, what I really want to try and move forward. So I was having a conversation over the weekend with a lawyer friend of mine about something completely different, and I threw in this thing about the ranges, and I sent him a copy of the or the link to the bylaws, and he came back and said there's two things here. Either they're within their rights to do what they've done, or they're not, and that's a legal issue. If legally they can do what they've done, it's really irrelevant whether or not they can back up the information they've provided. It's not very, he says it's not very nice or very friendly, neighbourly for them to do it and not provide clear evidence. But if they're legally able to do it, then they don't need to give it any reasons for doing it. So, which coincides with the information I'd been given previously in other informal chats. So from my point of view, what I want to try and do is to try and get a win out of this for Ash residents or for users, not just Ash, other people use it as well, but for Ash residents. And all the way through, Joe and I have been trying not only to get the whole the whole range or the whole firing plate reopened, but as a sort of fallback position was to try and get a corridor, central corridor, through the middle of the range of the firing plates, in order that people could actually get from the front to the back in the most direct route. But they did throw curved balls in by saying, well, if you put a fence up, because they'd need to separate the two out. But if you put a fence up, you could cause ricochet problems. So I said, well, I understand that, but if you put a wooden fence up, you wouldn't have the ricochet problems, because a bullet would go through wood in the same trajectory as if it was going through air.
Nobody, to my knowledge, has ever suggested that there should be a central corridor which can be accessed while there's firing.
No, that's not why they're firing. No, it's not.
But then why does bullets ricocheting?
No, it's when
it will endanger the soldiers that are firing. If a bullet ricochets off a metal fence, it could endanger the soldiers that are on the range.
Exactly, Sarah. They have done calculations as to where bullets can go, and the RDA is the extent of the where bullets can go. If you put a metal obstruction on the side and a bullet ricochets, it could then ricochet again off the metal fence and actually injure a soldier or MOD personnel. So that's the reason why. So that's why I said, well, if we go for a wooden fence, that's not a problem. And all of a sudden, then it was cost. And I said, well, if there's a cost to it, provided it's a benefit to Ash residents, the parish may well be able to assist, subject to it going to the council to look at. And of course, then they stopped talking to us because of the approaches to Parliament and MPs. So
it seems reasonable at this point to re-challenge. We were just discussing this while you were on the phone with Joe, to re-challenge the information we've had and sort of say, yeah, thank you very much for providing that information. It is at significant variance to the information you provided previously. Why is that?
Yeah,
I think the challenge needs to come, Nigel, is that we are basically, the figures they've got don't necessarily change linked to the closures they've done. We saw in their original presentation there was a large damage to an external gate, which wouldn't have been impacted by the closure that is currently under. And so without understanding explicitly which activities and which fixes they have done, can we imply that that cost that they've been giving us would have been saved by the closures that are now in effect? And that's where we need to get to for us and the residents to feel that the cost that they have been is implied is actual to the closures that are being caused.
No, I understand where you're coming from.
And then I think even with the central corridor, you will not have an impact to the picture that you've got that has been shown as the problem. Without opening up the wider ranges to the general public, you are not going to prevent vandalism on that scale. And that's the concern to me. We've been presented figures here that they can't back up again, and they are now implying that even though they've closed it, there's still troublemakers. And my position is that the closure has exacerbated the problems rather than making it easier, making it less.
No, I agree. That's one of the things I was going to write back after we had this conversation. I was going to create a letter and point out the fact, well, from your letter, it seems that since you've actually closed the firing plates, you've actually had more vandalism per your figures than previously suggested. Therefore, that hasn't really, or it hasn't at all, stopped the problem, and therefore you must be having.
Actually made it worse.
Yeah, you must be continuing to have loss of training because of the increased amount of vandalism. Yeah, per se, if vandalism goes up by 50,000, by double, say, then surely the amount of lost hours will have gone up by double. So is this really not a reason for them to have a rethink?
Yeah, and I think the figures they've quoted there don't tie in with the freedom of information that we've already had on the number of incidents in the past year. They are certainly at loggerheads to that. So again, we're at a point where we don't understand the figures that are presented, and I don't have any trust in those figures.
I think it might be worth also asking, when were these spreadsheets or databases or wherever this information, when were these created? Because I do have a certain suspicion that they may have been, is manufactured a too strong a word, since they have begun to realise that we're not going to be fobbed off with their general, oh, it's about 170,000, and we've just made that up, and now they've come up with something more specific.
I think the vendors.
So if they didn't, sorry, can I just finish?
Yeah,
if they didn't have these figures when we asked for them, what, 6 months, a year ago, how come they can produce them with such accuracy now? Somebody has been sitting down doing a bit of creative accounting, I would suggest.
When he responded to my first email, the MOD responded, whichever one it was, they actually said they did have the records of the vandalism, but under the Freedom of Information Act, it would be excessive time to draw that information together.
But that's not what they told me, Nigel.
No, that's what they told you.
Not what they told me.
It's in the letter that you've got a copy of that I sent you. Which
and I've the FOI that I've done basically said, the email that I've sent you basically said that we do not have the means to connect the two together effectively, and I need to go and dig through that.
Which two together?
The costs and the trespasses, effectively, the criminal acts and the costs, and where things were fixed, as in the location of that gate, and the cost of fixing that gate.
I understand that.
And that's what we need to get to, isn't it? Because they've said it's cost us 80 grand for, I can't remember what figure to use, sorry. 34,000 in 2019. If one of those things, and it looked like a very costly fix to that gate, was the gate, then we can probably knock at least half of that cost off that list, because that's nothing to do with the closures that are done now. They need to present us
whether the whole of the ranges was closed. I mean,
exactly.
it's an external gate. It could have been caused by, somebody veering off the road. Who, it's nonsense to suggest that that's in any way connected. Sorry, Carl, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, and but that is my point, Kate. It is linking the cost of a vandalism event and the cost of the lost hours with that, was because if we had closed it at that point, that would not have happened. And so far, they haven't produced evidence of that. And in fact, they produced evidence contrary to that with the image they put in that email.
It comes back to what I originally said. If they are legally able to shut ranges, they don't give a reason.
Right. And
what we're trying to find out is the justification of why they took the action that they did, which actually is unneighbourly.
There's two bits.
The second thing is that in the letter that he sent to me, or the MOD sent to me in my FOI, they clearly said that they had, whilst they had the evidence to support the vandalism costs, it would exceed the costs that the FOI, I think it's 20 hours or something. It would take far more time than that to collect the information. What they did also, they went on to say that they didn't have the evidence to show the loss of hours. But on the response that I've copied you in on, I don't know whether you've sent it around the group or not. In that letter, which I'll call up again, I'm pretty certain I recall that it said specifically a number of hours.
It is.
It's very clearly defined as to what constitutes a, sort of like a lost hours and how they calculate.
That's right. So how did they get that figure if they've got no evidence at all, unless they've actually extrapolated it recently? I don't know.
So a couple of things there. One of the responses they sent to me is that they stated the hours would have been commercial decisions and just experience from the people, because it wasn't recorded when the range was closed for lost hours, because it was then shifted to another venue, and therefore wasn't part of anything that was official record, which goes against what is in the letter that's just been sent to you. And just to go back to that point that you made earlier about the legal, whether they are allowed to or not, this is where we are going with the current legal. There's a give me some words, please. I lose my words at times. A fundraising.
Crowdfunding has now put us in a position where we are able now to take some proper legal advice and begin the process towards judicial review.
And that is a key point there, that even with a judicial review and whether they are legally allowed to, we need to answer that question, and that will form the basis of our next steps, along with raising the priorities, ensuring that at the borough and the county level we're raising these things. We are going down those paths. So there is a legal question, you rightly pointed out, Nigel, about whether they are able to, and that will feed into any future works, because that will go back to the original bylaws and the original scope for Ash Common, and we can take that forward into the new bylaws review, because we shouldn't be impacting or changing or overriding anything that's happening so far. And then obviously we still want to, as members of the public and taxpayers, we want our money and our taxes to be spent in the most appropriate way. And if these incidents and these events and these lost training hours can be reduced by reopening the ranges, I think that's a more appropriate way of spending our funds.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time. I need to go at past because I've got another call. Are there any immediate next steps that we need to discuss? What are the next steps?
The immediate step, Nigel, you said you're going to reply to this email. So
I'm going to reply to the email. I'm going to express surprise that they've managed to provide now a very accurate figure for lost range hours. I do see on the letter that it refers to, in 2019 it was 34,315 obviously criminal damage and 6,128 range hours lost, and then it says in brackets it was 2,430 and no range hours lost in 2015. Then it says in the period January 20 to March 21 this was reduced to £8,016 for handle costs and 1,124 hours lost time. So there has been a reduction.
But like we were saying earlier, Nigel, there was a big thing that happened last year that was probably had more impact than that fence. And that pandemic that we've all been suffering through, we've not been able to leave our homes, has probably had more impact than that fence closure, which can then be justified by the big picture they've put in there, which has happened even with the closure. And Nigel, I would hope that you would question the figures that they've got there to ensure that you ask for the exact location of each of the acts that were done and the timing of that, because that is the only way they can fully justify the closure. If that 34,000 figure was done with everything that was in the closed area now, then they've got to maybe be able to justify the closure. If they can't do that, then they can't justify it. And this is getting back to evidence, and we should be going to the facts and the figures rather than any view.
Yeah, and appreciating, I couldn't agree more, and appreciating your point about whether or not it's legal, that's obviously being challenged separately. If it's not legal, then we will need to know what that justification is in place so that we can challenge it. And the legal advice that we've been given is that the term enclosed space is not adequately defined. It is right to enclose a space arbitrarily. So that's kind of
even the DIO and the MOD do not have a definition of what constitutes specially enclosed.
Yeah.
And they've confirmed that in an FIO. So even they don't know what they think they mean.
That's always the thing. Legal, at the end of the day, something can actually revolve just around one word. It's like, you know, it's like the difference between shall and should for legal. Yeah. Shall is must, should, well, you should really, but you know, it's just one word can make a difference. So I understand what you're saying.
True, but legal precedence is that in any contract, any ambiguity benefits the party that did not draft it. So,
yeah. So I understand that.
I must go.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
I do understand when you go to court, the judge would often look at not necessarily what was written, but what did the parties do as a result of that agreement? And if what they did actually isn't in line with what the agreement is, the judge will rule that what they did is actually what they meant to put in the agreement and not what the agreement says. So I do understand that.
Although we're in a slightly different area because obviously that's the law of contract that you're talking about, and you're absolutely right. This is the area of public law, which is a rather different, not one that I have a great deal of experience of.
I think that's why we're trying to get that legal advice,
exactly.
Isn't it? Certainly.
I think the whole idea of the what I would suggest, Nigel, is that when you reply that we don't go down the track of talking about whether it's legal or whether it's not. We are approaching it from the position that what they have done is in breach of the bylaws, and therefore we have every right to challenge their supposed grounds for closing the range floor, and so I think we need to keep chipping away at their reasoning. I mean, there are so many arguments that they've basically, if you'll forgive the pun, shot themselves in the foot, because they were saying, well, we can't give you the figures, and now they've produced all these lovely figures. They've said, we only made this decision recently, whereas in previous incarnations they've said, this has been on the card since 2015. It's a matter of public record that at the ASH ranges, what they do here is the blueprint for what they do elsewhere. So everybody else ought to be very worried as well. So we're kind of in the vanguard, and I think that puts an extra responsibility on us to take them to task over this and to really make them justify what they've done. Because as I understand it, although my knowledge is a little bit shaky, when you're talking about a judicial review, it's not just about the absolute legality of what they've done, but there is also an element of what is reasonable. What would a reasonable person, how would a reasonable person, your average man or woman in the street, how would they react to the way that this has been handled? And that it's against natural justice. They haven't taken into account the effect on the local population, and that is those sorts of things are taken into account on a judicial review, as I understand it.
Yeah, I'm not a great on judicial review. I know that generally it costs a lot of money, and only people who benefit.
Yeah, that's for sure. Anything to do with law costs a lot of money.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Nigel. But that's why we've got the fundraising up. Yeah, so hopefully we can spread that load. I
will craft a letter, going through this letter and take out various points and go back to him. But also emphasise the fact that clearly vandalism is still going on, and it's very difficult for him to justify that. It's the closure of the firing plate that's actually caused the reduction in costs, etc. When in fact we've had a pandemic. And
also ask him to just tell us where all these incidents were. It would be great to
and when specifically.
Where and when would be good.
and a cost against each one. I think also it's interesting that the specific figures given for, hang on, I'm just going back to it, 2020, where he says January 2020 to March 2021, it has been reduced. Let's not forget that the range floor was actually only closed on the 1st of April. So within that figure, you've got 3 months of, unrestricted, well, not unrestricted access, but the access that we all enjoyed previously. And it was only on the 1st of April that it was closed. So it would be interesting to see within that how much of it was within that 3 months and how much of it was in from April onwards.
Yeah, it does run the risk of them saying that actually all this costs and loss of hours was between January and April.
Prove it. I mean, let's see.
Exactly. I think that's exactly
that's
it.
the thing, isn't it?
You've given this period of 15 months. Perhaps you'd like to break that down into January to 31st March 20, and then 1st of April 20 to 31st March 21. But leave that with me. I do need to sort of create it in a particular way in order to get information from them.
I appreciate that, Nigel. I think we're just highlighting the things that we would like you to raise on our behalf.
Yep.
As our parish councillor, and we have sent a freedom of information for the breakdown of these figures, like I said. So I'm not convinced that we will ever get anything from that, because I'm sure it will be over the 20 days still. But it seems to be one rule for them and one rule for us at the moment on those things. But yeah, we can only do our best, and the best at the moment is to respond to this email and point out the inaccuracies and the statements they're making on their own, to not support the claim themselves, and we'll go from there. One thing I just need to clarify before we finish is, can we make this letter public? Is there any reason not to?
Which letter? The one that
you sent us?
Yes.
From Nigel, from Mr. Quin.
Yes, it was. I sent it to you specifically so you could actually,
Thank
because
you.
as far as
it wasn't clear. I'm just clarifying that it wasn't clear. So
no, my letter to him was sent to you. Was sent out, and therefore his response should just as easily be published. At the end of the day, I'm writing on behalf of the. I'm writing on behalf of the residents of Ash, not on my behalf. I'm writing on for the residents of Ash.
It's only dotting the T's there, Nigel, and making sure that we're above board.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Just one other minor thing. I mean, I don't want to make too much of it because it's not something that we want to go down this road. But the where they've drawn the picture on the photograph with the little yellow circles showing where the lovely new path is, they're actually wrong. Those circles, the lower circle is in the wrong place. There is no new path where they've shown it.
No.
Right.
So even they don't know what they're talking about.
We know that. I think we worked that one out over the last year and a half, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, I don't want to make that a big thing, because we are saying that the path, wherever it is and whatever it is not sufficient compensation for what we've lost. So, but it's just another indication of their sloppy attitude towards this whole business, really, in my view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so leave it with me. So I would hope to get the letter out by the end of the week, if possible. I just need to be careful what I do. I need it to be reread by a couple of other people to make sure I don't necessarily go over the top.
No, appreciate that. Thank you.
Tempting though it might be.
Indeed, my last letter was quite forceful in some ways. And
isn't it interesting how you only got a response to that when you'd sort of taken it up the chain of command?
That's right. In fact, the address that I spoke to you about last time, they came back to me on the Thursday or Friday, whatever it was, quite shortly afterwards, and said, oh no, it's not, this is not what we do. You need to write to correspondence at Parliament or something. And I wrote, effectively, I copied the same email I sent to the other one straight to the correspondence people. They again came back the following day saying, thank you very much. This time it's 20 working days. And it was, say, within 2 or 3 days after that, that I got the letter from Jeremy Quin. So
And
whether it had any effect, I don't know. But, you know, you can only read into it what you might think.
And the very next day, we all had a letter from the DIO. Everybody who'd written to Quin, we all got the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it didn't have any of the, interestingly, it didn't have any of the information in it in terms of costs.
It was just boilerplate.
It was very much more general. It sort of makes it interesting to sort of compare the two. I'm very happy to share my version of the letter. It is on the Save Ash Ranges website or Facebook page.
Well, it doesn't come in and say confidential, and I would,
yeah.
If he had come back to me and said this is confidential, I would have gone back and said I can't treat this as confidential simply because it's of wider interest to the residents. Yeah. But he hasn't put it as confidential, and I see no reason why people can't see what he has said. Effectively, he's saying what the MOD have told him to say, because they would have written the letter and he's just signed it effectively. As far as I understand how MPs generally work. But he's got to be happy with the contents of this letter, because I pointed out to him in the first letter that he shouldn't be signing a letter unless he's absolutely satisfied that the contents are correct.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure in his view the content is correct. We just need to justify. We just need a bit more detail, and that's all we've been asking for the last 18 months, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time, Nigel.
I don't know whether it probably wouldn't be worthwhile having a meeting in 2 weeks' time based on the previous regime in terms of replying.
Let's see how it goes. Because
have a think about it. Have a think about it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll certainly just make sure I'll ping you or whatever, and we can just have a email conversation if anything else happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, my freedom of information should be back at the beginning of June, so we go from there at the very least.
Yeah, unless they extend it on the basis of can't quite get to give us another 20 days, and then you get nothing. Yeah. That's what happened to me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nigel. I can hear your frustration.
Good night, everyone.
I appreciate it.
Good night.
Thank you. Do you want to stay on, Kate?
Yeah, just for a sec. Yeah. See you tomorrow, Nigel.